I just remember saying, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm totally fine. And I walked out the door, slammed it, went to my car. And then I remember this tiny little thought in my head of, Kim, if you're fine, why is it so painful for you to walk?
Hello, welcome to Act Inspired Behavior, the show about real people and their real stories of transformation and change, told through the lens of acceptance and commitment therapy. I'm Kim Loneck. Today's episode is about recognizing patterns of behavior. So take a moment and think about a time that you have been compelled to do things that you knew weren't good for you. Maybe it was a bad habit, or a really ill-timed decision, or a choice you made which was more to please others than to honor your true desires. Where does that come from? Perhaps you know yourself well enough to recognize those patterns of behavior and some of the thoughts that are entangled within this larger pattern. I certainly can. In fact, my mind immediately goes to a time, a breakup actually, that needed to happen way longer than it did with a person I thought I really loved, but who I realized after a while didn't love me back. I ignored all logic and even the voice that told me it wasn't the relationship for me. I ended up suffering in both my mind and my body, and it wasn't until I had a weeks-long anxiety episode that I realized something. When I took the time to pause, I saw that I was about to make one of the biggest mistakes of my life. I was about to move across the country to be with this person who, by the way, remember, didn't love me back. The future romantic plans I had for us were actually just my plans, not ours. And because I was acting in ways that my mind recognized was completely wrong for me, my body rebelled in a sense. I remember having tremors, headaches, fatigue, and it got so bad I couldn't talk sometimes or get out of bed. And I remember there was a moment when I was literally laying in bed. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't talk. And my friend Kelly came to visit me. And it was the look on her face that finally told me something is really, really wrong. I ended up deciding not to move across the country with this person, and I broke up with him shortly thereafter, which was really difficult and heart-wrenching for me. But once this happened, my anxiety, it lifted like this cloud. Though I can tell you it has never gone away completely, and I'm at this point now where I just accept it. This is part of me. However, ever since, I've paid more attention to those little inklings, those little gut feelings that tell me something is off. And then perhaps when I dig a little deeper, I find that I'm ignoring what is truly right for me. And then I course correct. How about you? I bet you have something that's similar to that. Maybe it's not a breakup, but something else. Something where you're ignoring, perhaps. Something that your inner voice is trying to tell you. Our guest today has a story to tell about her own experience, and before we get there, I want to let you know that we're touching on the topic of eating disorders, which is to say that I hope listeners who are sensitive to this subject are aware before they decide to listen. If this is a potentially triggering subject for you, please be kind to yourself in whatever way possible. Thank you.
Welcome, Kim. I'm so excited to have you here. How are you?
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you.
Awesome.
How are you?
Doing pretty good. Sitting here in my closet at 7:30 in the morning. So today you're gonna share your story of a ongoing past struggle and then how you learned to work through it. And that struggle is an eating disorder. And I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you for being willing to have this conversation and being willing to share your story. And then before we get there, Kim, do you want to just take a moment and tell us who you are?
Yeah, sure. My name is Kimberly Loneck. I am currently studying for my BCBA exam. That's more of what I'm doing. Who I am is a bit, different.
Right.
Who I am is, I think, someone who who has learned from my past struggles and moves towards my values every day. I moved from New York to Massachusetts, and now currently I'm in Virginia. I like to go hiking. I like to be outdoors. I really enjoy nature, read about ACT, and journal and take care of myself. So that's very important.
Yeah. And I know that when we met over Instagram and then we connected, there was a lot of commonalities around our shared mutual nerdiness around ACT and personal growth.
True.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we kind of get a sense of who you are. And I really like the fact that we're just people moving through our lives. And we both happen to be in the field of behavior analysis. When I asked you to think of a time that you had a struggle or you used ACT processes to get through a struggle, you thought of this story. And this was before you knew about ACT. That was really interesting. And I think that's how it goes for a lot of us, that we have these internal strengths, right, that we can draw upon. We don't even know where they come from, but now we have the language to kind of put the words to it.
When you asked me to tell a story, it's like, there are many stories I could tell. This is something that just has impacted my life so significantly. I don't know where I'd be without it. I mean, I always love to look at things with silver linings. If there's something bad or something that has happened, you know, there's always some silver lining to it. And I was kind of unsure. I was uneasy. I'm like, well, that is really deep. At the same time, it's just something I really wanted to share and get out there, because I know that whether, you know, somebody is struggling with an eating disorder or not, the feelings of loneliness and isolation, especially during COVID, are very relevant. And there are things that people are, I'm sure, engaging in, behaviors that they're doing to avoid these feelings and stuff like that. And what I learned was it's okay to feel that way. And of course you're going to feel that way, because I was in a situation where I was lonely and I was depressed, and, you know, it just makes sense that, of course, you know, that could happen, and that did happen, and that's okay that it happened, and to be gentle with myself.
So, do you want to tell us about how this first started for you?
Yes. So it started for me when I was about 26 years old. Right now I'm 34. And I had taken a year off from graduate school and decided after taking the year off to go back. And this graduate school that I was going to was in upstate New York, and it was pretty close to my parents. So I was living with them. I was going to graduate school for physics, pursuing either a PhD or master's. And something about graduate school that a lot of people don't tell you, especially if it's in like the hard sciences like physics, math, chemistry, is that it can be very isolating. And there's a lot of work involved, a lot of hard work. I was living with my parents at the time because I you know, to save money. The university was close to my parents. And honestly, and I say this because it's true, I did not have any friends. I was socially isolated, and also struggling with social anxiety. That's kind of the context of, you know, how this all started. I went back to graduate school, and the motivation for going back to graduate school after taking the year off was, oh my God, okay, I need to be doing something with my life. You know, I'm not doing anything. I felt very lost. And I was like, okay, Kim, you have to do something. You know, you're right now, you're just being lazy. You're a loser. You're living with your parents. You know, so all these thoughts came, and I was like, okay, I'll just go back to graduate school, get, you know, my PhD in physics, and just go from there. And
I'll just get my PhD in physics, you know.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. It's that easy. And I mean, I'm good at physics, you know, and I knew how to do that work and pursue it, but it wasn't something I wanted to do. So right off the bat, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this even though I don't want to do it. And I knew that deep inside, but I didn't know what else to do. So going back to school, not wanting to do it, being socially isolated, you know, not having any friends, and then getting into the grind where it even isolates you even more in graduate school because there's a lot of work involved. When I made that decision, I was like, okay, that's not right. There's something wrong in my life. And so I'm going back to grad school. That's one thing I can fix. What's another thing I can fix? What's something else I need to work on?
Yeah.
And this is, social media kind of comes in and they portray like, oh, you should be eating this way, or you should be doing this with your life, or this or that. So then I looked at myself and I'm like, okay, I'm not eating quote unquote right. There's something wrong with how I'm eating and what I'm eating. And I'm also not exercising enough, So not having anybody around and just being really lonely, I started to pick on myself and the habits and behaviors I had. And that revolved around eating and certain foods. And it also revolved around exercise.
Mm-hmm.
So as the year went on, I changed my diet drastically and developed an eating disorder. That was never intentional. It happened, There were things that the eating disorder said, you can eat that. And then there were things that the eating disorder said, you can't eat that. And the list of the cannot eats became much, much larger.
So question here, like, what do you think the rules and the doing this pattern of behavior, what do you think it served for you in the short term? Did it give you this sense of something that you were seeking?
So I thought that it would make me more content, like I'm eating right, quote unquote, I'm exercising. So I thought it would make me content. It did not do that. It just wanted more, actually. It wanted me to restrict more and exercise more. In the moment, it did give me this sense of purpose, like I'm doing something. I have purpose in this life right now.
Yeah. And you kind of saw it there in the moment, like, okay, this feels justified. This feels good.
Yes.
But then over the long term, did it feel worse?
Yeah, definitely. Towards the end of the year, in the spring, I took my final exams and I was deteriorating pretty quickly. That summer, I just decided to take the summer off and not work or anything, which allowed me to give more time to the eating disorder and to the exercise. So then my diet became so restrictive. I was, hardly eating anything all day. And I lost a lot of weight and became very emaciated. And then the exercise that I would cycle, that was my go-to exercise. I would cycle like 15 miles a day on no energy. So long-term, my body was starting to, eat itself because I wasn't nourishing it enough. My muscle deteriorated a lot. My brain wasn't functioning correctly. I could read, but I could not remember what I was reading. My hearing was going. I like just so physically.
Yeah.
And my sight was like, I just saw like stars all the time, and my body was in excruciating pain because of, the pressure on my joints and just the lack of nutrition that was occurring was not enough,
Yeah.
Now, think about this behavior pattern here for a moment. Kim was in a context that didn't suit her or her values, being in graduate school as an example. And then in addition to that pressure of her chosen field of study, she was also suffering from feelings and thoughts associated with isolation and loneliness. As a behavior analyst, we look to behavior and we see it in context. We know that behavior is rational. Kim's behavior, her eating disorder, wasn't serving her in the long term, but it was serving a need right here, right now, in the short term. And that need was to escape those uncomfortable feelings, the isolation, the uncertainty, the dissatisfaction. What I want to highlight here is our basic human tendency to avoid and escape uncomfortable things, including the thoughts and feelings that make us sad and frustrated, the thoughts that tell us that we're not good enough. This tendency is what we call experiential avoidance, the pattern of escaping pain in the short term. Unfortunately, this tendency has its price because for the more we escape, the higher the cost in the long term, right? It's kind of like keeping a baby tiger in your closet. And every time you close the door, you have to feed it to make it happy and make it stay there. But as you would guess, the more you keep it confined, the more you must feed it, right? The more effort it takes to keep it hidden and at bay. But as it grows, the closet may no longer be adequate for containing it, and sometimes this tiger may grow so large that you spend all of your time managing it, avoiding the pain of confronting it. So in acceptance and commitment therapy, the opposite of this pattern of experiential avoidance is what we call the skill of acceptance. The skill of being willing to allow your tiger to roam free from time to time. And your tiger might look like anxiety, it might look like depression, or those uncomfortable feelings, right? But you don't necessarily force it into hiding. Acceptance is living with your arms wide open to all of life's struggles and all of life's wonderful things it has to offer. And then by doing so, we're able to free ourselves to actually use both of those arms and our full mind and our full capacity to make decisions that are really truly aligned with our desires. Okay, so let's get back to her story and hear what happens next.
About where your body was and where your heart was in that moment. Do you look back at it now and just feel, how does that make you feel to say that out loud, that you did that?
I feel sad, but I also feel that I didn't know what I was doing, and that's okay.
Yeah. What is something that you wish you would want to tell yourself?
Even though that person would probably not listen to me, because being in an eating disorder, it's hard to listen to anybody who's trying to give advice or give you help because you think nothing's wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to go back in time or something and tell myself, I would tell myself that this is not you. You are more than this, and this is a way to cope with this isolation you're feeling, this sadness that you're feeling.
Yeah. I mean, just me sitting here listening to you, I just want to give your former self a hug. You know?
Yeah.
Because it's not like there's the words there so much as there's the posture of, the love that you wish you could have given yourself then. Yeah.
And I've thought about that, the question you just asked. I've thought about that, like, what would I tell myself back then? Many times. And it's just very hard to listen to anybody. And my parents actually approached me midsummer and said, Kim, you need help. There's something wrong with you. And they're my parents, and I love them terribly. And I just remember saying, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm totally fine. And I walked out the door, slammed it, went to my car. And then I remember this tiny little thought in my head of, Kim, if you're fine, why is it so painful for you to walk? Because my body was that bad. It was withering to nothing. So it's just, even from, my parents and them caring for me and loving me, even their approach was like, talk to the hand, I'm totally fine. Or somebody I really admire had come and told me in that moment, it's okay, and let's work through this or whatever. I don't know how much that would affect, and that just coming from, because I know what it was like being in that. It's an addiction, and I was in denial that anything was wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually took my parents when they said, Kim, you can either move out and live on your own, or you can go get treatment. And so they gave me an ultimatum. My first thought that I had, that I remember having when they told that to me, was, if I move out, I'm going to have to get a job, and I can't get a job and work and go to school at the same time. Like, I knew physically and mentally, I was not capable of doing that. So I was like, okay, I won't be able to do that. And the eating disorder was like Kim, yeah, of course you can. Like, just get a job, don't go to school, get an apartment or whatever, earn money to pay for the apartment, and just continue your habits. And then there's a tiny little voice inside of me when they gave that ultimatum to me that said, Kim, this isn't you. You know this isn't you. So I listened to that tiny little voice somewhere deep inside me. And I went back to my parents and I said, okay, I'm going to get treatment. And fortunately, they had done all the research for me, and they're like, all right, Kim, they were like, okay, here are the places that you can go. I mean, that's just like the epitome of my parents and my best friends in the world.
Yeah. This place of unconditional love. Oh, that's really touching. I mean, and it's that sense that we wish we could have had for ourselves, but someone had to step in and do it for us.
Exactly. And I think it was my dad that really, he put me in a position that my eating disorder did not want. But he is a social worker, and he has worked with people who struggle with alcoholism. And he saw the state I was in, and he knew it was an eating disorder. He's like, this is a type of addiction, So he, based on, his own experience and his job and his work, he knew in a way how to handle the situation. They had to be like, okay, Kim, it's either this or this. That's it. Because, we love you very much, but we don't want to see you like this. But that was a loving move on their part, even though it didn't seem like it at the time.
Yeah, it's exactly what you needed.
Yes.
As you're going through treatment, I mean, it really sounds like there's this gigantic barrier for you to even be willing to say yes to that. Yes. And it's so interesting too that your mind it went around the logic of, I have this addiction, or I have this, these unhealthy habits that I shouldn't be doing that are harming my health. Your brain went to, oh, and then I'll have to work and I don't have the energy to work.
Yes.
It's just so interesting how our minds just come up with these really elaborate different things to convince us of something so that we don't have to face those really hard truths.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly what occurred. And yeah, I was trying to justify moving out on my own and continuing with these maladaptive behaviors that were only making me struggle more and more. So it's just any way to avoid confrontation of what was really underneath it all. And what was underneath all of this was just avoidance. I was avoiding any type of socialization. I was avoiding the feelings of loneliness. I was avoiding the feelings of sadness and depression and anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And confronting this new thing that has been created out of the pain, the pain of dealing with the pain.
Yes. And it snowballs. And then it just gets more and more and more if it's not addressed, I think.
Yeah. So tell us about your treatment and the journey that you went through to really confront some of these things more head on.
So I arrived at the facility, I don't know what else to call it, to do an intake evaluation. After the intake evaluation, she brought my parents in and she said, okay, so you're going to have to be hospitalized today. And I'm like, what? But that's how real it was and how bad it had gotten. And if I didn't get in at that time, chances are something really bad could have happened. So, I remember looking at my parents and, we had come this far and I had come this far, and it's like, okay. And they dropped me off. I went to the inpatient unit, the hospital, and started my journey there. And I was scared. I was terrified. I had never been in any kind of treatment. I was never hospitalized for mental illness. And this was just terrifying. I was on the inpatient unit for about 2.5 weeks, and I journaled every day and I meditated every day. that helped me to process, okay, what's going on? Why am I here? What happened? But at the same time, my brain was still so foggy. I mean, and physically not being capable of doing much. And there was this, my dad told me, or there's some saying, is that, feed your body, the mind will follow. So I kept remembering that every day. And also in the time that I was on the inpatient unit and through like journaling and trying to understand what was going on and realizing like, this is not who I am. And then asking myself, okay, who am I? What do I want? And then that leads to what do I value? And it's like, well, I value a healthy body. I value nourishing and taking care of myself. And so after about 2.5 weeks on the inpatient unit, I was stable enough to go to their residential unit, which is basically they rent apartments across from their hospital. And it's less restrictive, but there's still like mental health counselors there and all that. And we go to groups all day long. And that's when my brain really started to come back. I could start to see things and hear things without a buzzing in my ear. Nervous system was cooperating. Beforehand, it was just kind of going haywire, and I'd feel like tingles all up and down my legs and my body. And by the time I got to the residential program, it was getting better. I was in a lot less pain. So my brain was now kind of coming to realizing like, okay, this is where I am. This is what happened. Okay, what was going on? Why did this happen? Okay, well, I was avoiding all of these things I didn't want to be feeling. The second thing that came with that was this whole time I've been doing things I did not want to be doing. I went to physics grad school. I did not want to be doing that.
Yes.
I, engaging in eating disorder behaviors and withering my body down to nothing. I did not want to be doing that. So when I realized I was doing all these things I didn't want to be doing, I also realized that I have the freedom now to do things that I want to be doing. What do I want to do? And that came up with a big question mark. I have no idea what I want to be doing at all, because it seemed like my whole life, or most of it, I had no idea what I even enjoyed.
Yeah.
And I think that wraps into all of this anxiety growing up and depression and, this social anxiety, that I really did not know what I liked or what I wanted. But that also gave me an opportunity to explore. And I started to, when I was in residential, I started to paint. And I didn't know if I liked it or not, but I just started it. And I found to enjoy it. And I started to do yoga when I was there. And it's like, I don't know if I'll like yoga, but why not? I'll try it.
Yeah.
So it went from being very rigid in my brain of like, oh, I'm not going to like that. I'm not going to do it. Thinking about how things are going to make me feel and then not do it because I'm afraid how they're going to make me feel, versus now it's like, I don't know how it's going to make me feel. So why not try it? And if I don't like it, I don't have to continue it. From there, I started to really learn a lot about myself, what I enjoy, what I like, what I want, and what I value. And when I discovered what I value, which is number one is taking care of myself and nurturing myself, everyday actions are based on those values. Do I want to be doing this? Is this something I value? If it is, then do it. If it's not, forget it.
Yeah. Kim, as you're talking about some of the things that you were, like, for example, with a physics degree, that was something that you were good at and therefore should do, and that you should, be going back to school because that's the thing that you should do, because what else are you going to do? You don't know. And
yes.
I mean, that just reminds me of just being in my 20s, this wanting to, not knowing what you want because you don't really have like a clear idea because you haven't been exposed to maybe enough things in your life to decide what you like, but then also there's this almost allegiance to, I have to follow the rules. I have to do what I think other people would approve of.
Yeah. And I think that was, I could do the work and I was good at it. And that was like you mentioned, it was to the approval of my father. It was to the approval of my professors. I was doing it to get approval and praise. But just, my going through treatment, my dad, and I talked to my dad about this. And he's like, Kim, all I ever want for you is you to be happy. After he told me that, I was like, God, I've been doing all these things, kind of subconsciously to get approval from you, when it's like, all you want me is to be happy. And of course, I think, as a parent myself, that's all we want for our kids are just, we want you to be happy. Don't you don't have to get approval from me. Once he had told me that, I was like, I'm glad you told that to me. I kind of wish you told that to me sooner. But
would you have listened?
Probably not, because it becomes a rule in the like rule governed behavior in my brain. And after 20 years of thinking that's what I had to do, and if he just had told me, "Yeah, Kim, just do what you want," it's like, well, that leaves me with now I have to go out and figure out what I want to do.
Yeah, it's so much easier to be told what to do.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's much easier. Because freedom in a way can be very terrifying.
Yeah. Do you see yourself being now in a place where, given that freedom to just figure out what you love and going for it, are you in a better place now?
Yes, for the most part, I sit down with myself and the choices that I make, is this in the direction of my value? Is this in the direction of where I want to go? Like my true self, where I truly want to go and be. I reflect back on that period in my life where, I'd become very sick and I got better. And when I see that, I see two sides of that. The first one is like, wow, that was a very tragic thing that happened. But on the other hand, if that didn't happen, I would not have learned so much about myself today. And I probably would not be where I am now. I am in a way grateful that it did happen, despite how horrific and tragic it was.
Yeah, I love that. I wouldn't trade this pain that I had for anything, because it led me here today.
Yes.
Yeah, it makes you grateful too for the things that you have now, or the growth that you've been able to accomplish up to this point.
Yes, I've definitely grown a lot since then, and I am happy to say I'm content with my life. And along with that also came this acceptance of myself and my sexuality, which is something that I had hid for a long time. And I was 27 years old when I had my first real committed relationship. From that, it wasn't just like focusing solely on myself. It was also, okay, what other things do I want? I want friends. I want relationships. I value that. And now I'm in a wonderful relationship with a woman I really love, and she's my partner, and I could not be happier. And had that not occurred, I don't know what would have happened. But
yeah. Yep. I led you to her and her to you.
Exactly. Oh. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kim. Thanks for sharing and just putting yourself out there. I think a lot of people, they're not going to have the same experience as you, but I can imagine people out there will have similar experiences of going through really, really tough times, and how they are also grateful for it too, that it led them to where they are now, even though it really sucked in the moment.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for spending your Sunday morning with me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been very wonderful to talk with you. Yaka. Where are you? Oh no, she fell asleep.
In this episode, you heard from Kim Loneck, a future behavior analyst and woman who has confronted her biggest challenges, making a life that is more filled with acceptance and willingness, allowing her to live a life that she truly values. Maybe you connected to her story and can look to something in your life where you faced a similarly but different pattern of avoidance. Either way, I invite you to actually, or maybe metaphorically, hug yourself right now, and when you're ready, step forward and be willing to live a life that is characterized by open arms. If you're interested in reaching out and telling your story or would like to learn more through my blog, workshops, or coaching, find me on Instagram at ActInspiredBehavior. Email me at gabby@actinspiredbehaviorcoaching.com or use the link from my website listed in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you, Andrew, for helping me produce this episode. And if this episode resonated with you, please subscribe to this podcast and stay tuned for future episodes.
Can I see what you drew? Black sparkle. Rainbow night. That sounds awesome. Black sparkles. That's so cool.
Hello again. I want to take a moment and say that this podcast is for educational purposes only. Content and conversation provided in this podcast should not be taken as or replace professional or therapeutic recommendations. As a board-certified behavior analyst, my goal is to disseminate ACT and behavior analysis to the wider public and have meaningful conversations to further explore our understanding. If you are concerned about your own personal well-being, I encourage you to seek out the help of a licensed professional who can provide individual support to you. Thank you so much.